Hello and welcome to Diplomatic Channel. I'm Amarachi Ubani. This week on the program, we're taking a closer look at issues surrounding the peace deal by U.S. President Donald Trump for Gaza and the pressure on Hamas to accept it. President Donald Trump gave Hamas up until 6 p.m. Washington, D.C. time on Sunday to accept the deal. By Saturday, we learned Hamas had agreed to the return of all the Israeli hostages, dead and alive. According to the deal, Hamas would have 3 days to make the exchange. On Sunday, the U.S. president said he thinks the hostages held in Gaza will start to be freed very soon as mediators meet in Egypt for indirect peace talks between Hamas and Israel.
Well, it's a great deal for Israel, and it's a great deal for everybody. And you want to get your hostages back, right? You want them back, or do you not want them back? And it's a great deal for Israel. It's a great deal for the entire Arab world, Muslim world, and world. So we're very happy about it.
Although Hamas has accepted to release the hostages, the group's response does not mention the key demands of its disarmament and play no future role in Gaza's governance. Meanwhile, Israeli airstrikes continue in Gaza despite Trump telling Israel to immediately stop the bombing on Friday after Hamas responded to the proposed plan. The Israeli government says that while certain bombings have actually stopped inside of the Gaza Strip, there is no ceasefire in place at this point in time. At least 65 people were killed by Israeli military operations between Saturday and Sunday. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio told U.S. media, "You can't release hostages while there's still bombardments going on. That has to stop, but you also have to work through the other logistics." The 20-point plan proposes an end to fighting and release of 48 hostages, only 20 of whom are thought to be alive, in exchange for hundreds of detained Gazans. This exchange is expected to happen within 72 hours of Israel publicly accepting this agreement. And once the hostages are returned, Hamas members who commit to peaceful coexistence and to decommission their weapons will be given amnesty. Members of Hamas who wish to leave Gaza will be provided safe passage to receiving countries. Also in the plan, Gaza will be governed under the temporary transitional governance of a technocratic, apolitical Palestinian committee responsible for delivering the day-to-day running of public services and municipalities for the people in Gaza, just to mention a few of the conditions in the deal.
To have Hamas stay in Gaza and threaten us again and again and again with these horrific massacres.
Joining us now is security and public affairs analyst Alexander Okonkwo. He's here in Lagos. Alexander, thanks for joining us on the program today.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you so much to have me.
And we're recording this on Sunday evening, so we know that, we still don't have the update on whether or not Hamas has accepted the full deal of the U.S. President Donald Trump in connection, cooperation, with the Israeli Prime Minister. But Hamas has agreed to the release of the hostages in Gaza. There's no timeline to this, but the Israeli Prime Minister says he hopes to announce the hostages release in a few days. There's still some wariness here, about the hostage release. Why would Hamas not be believed completely, even though it's said it has agreed to release those hostages?
Oh, well, that's a good one. I will start by saying, as we speak, Hamas has shown the intention that they like the peace plan. Sorry, let me rephrase that. It's not that they like necessarily, but that they kind of accept the peace plan as of now, because there was an ultimatum on them. Remember, the Trump administration gave them just a few hours to decide. Otherwise, they would give a free hand, which they've been giving to Israel, to continue a large-scale attack, which is already what's going on anyway. The idea here is that there's a problem of lack of trust, and you mentioned it. You kind of, gave an idea into it in your question. Hamas, the only problem Hamas has now is that if we decide to release the few hostages, there are not so many. I think they're just about 70 or 65. If they release those hostages, what happens to, first, the Palestinians that were arrested? People don't know that over 2,000 Palestinians are arrested. They're in Israeli prisons, whatever. The Israeli army has totally encircled the West Bank and also Gaza. What happens in all those conditions? So the real problem that Hamas has is we don't know if if we say we release the hostages, which is the only thing they have going for them, because of course they are not as powerful as Israel, what would happen if Israel continues the attack? When we've seen that Netanyahu does not listen to anybody, even at a certain point, he didn't listen to Donald Trump. What would happen if Israel continues the attack?
Interestingly, the attacks are still continuing in Gaza.
Yes. No. I even mean even when they accept to release the hostage. As of now, nothing has happened. We must also explain to Nigerians that are listening that Hamas accepts to release the hostages and accepts the plan does not mean that we have gotten the details. So negotiations will go on for the next 10, 15 days, mostly in Egypt or Qatar. I want to believe it will be in Egypt because it's nearer. And then we will now go into details. So what I mean by details, let me take one example. If Hamas is saying they're going to release the 60 hostages or so, they will probably start by releasing the dead bodies. You see what I'm saying? Because they will definitely want to keep the alive hostages as a last-minute guarantee. So Israel will now say, based on those dead bodies, because we've given it back to the family, we can now do a proper deal. We will release 50 Palestinians, women and men and children. You see what I'm saying? So there's still, each point, there is a 20-point agenda. Each point will have to get into details of what happens within the point. So we have a long time to go. I would say easily 15 days of pure negotiations, watched by the EU, watched by the US, watched by the Arab League. So a lot of people are still involved. We are still far from whatever kind of peace that people imagine.
Yes, and someone raised, this question while I was talking, with my colleagues during the week, and that was that how do you put together a peace plan without having Hamas as part of the negotiations? How does the US and Israel put together a peace plan that Hamas is not part of, and yet you want them to agree to that peace deal? Could you talk a bit about that? How uninteresting and a bit how foreign, this deal is to Hamas. And I think the hostages deal is probably the most enticing part of the deal for Hamas.
Exactly. Everybody I've spoken to as well, both internationally and locally, are all having this scare about what kind of deal is this that is very asymmetric, does not favor Hamas at all. Besides the fact that they want the bombardment to stop, because citizens of Palestine are suffering, not only Hamas soldiers, fighters, but citizens of Palestine are suffering, women and children. And for like 2 years, nobody has gone to school in Gaza. People don't know that. No, there are no schools. You can't take the risk of going to school and get bombarded. The point is, there's nothing to gain for Hamas, literally, except stop the bombardment for the citizens of Palestine. They are not involved in the negotiation. They don't have details. They are supposed to disarm eventually. Israel should leave a certain zone at its will, so that it will be like a buffer zone where some foreign soldier officers will come in. The peace plan in terms of politics does not concern Hamas. Hamas, people keep forgetting. Hamas transformed into a political group. Hamas won the last elections in Palestine. Hamas runs the parliament. We are not saying they don't have terrorist, tendencies amongst them. What we are saying is that as we speak right now, as the plan is a 20-point agenda, there is, apart from releasing some Palestinians and stopping the bombardment that is ongoing, there is no incentive for Hamas to sign that group, that peace. What Trump is doing is that he's actually menacing them. He's actually saying to them, if you guys don't stop, this bombardment will escalate further. I mean, Israel will have a freer hand to go in and actually kill people the way it's been doing. So we have to be careful here. The Hamas fighters are saying, if we sign this peace agreement, what is the condition that Israel will not come back and attack us? Who will stop Netanyahu when nobody has stopped him? He has not listened to any government. The French, the Russians, the UK. The only person listening to is Trump, and at his own will. The Knesset, the extreme right of the Knesset, is saying they don't even want the peace agreement. People have not heard about that. They said they don't want the peace. They want Israel to continue, knowing that Israel has the upper hand today as we speak. They say continue and finish the job. What does finish the job mean? It means override Gaza, make Gaza the new the tourist zone in the Middle East for Israel and all that. All these things are not they're not realizable. People don't know. It's not possible to do them. It's very complicated. It's very complex.
Do you see a situation where, if Israel is given free hand to continue in Gaza, especially with its annexation plans, in the Gaza Strip, do you see a situation where, all the other Arab countries might empower Hamas, in this war?
Okay, that's a delicate one. I would say the menace in the Middle East is a total disintegration of whatever is happening now. Do you notice that just last week there were some attacks in the UK that were related to somebody that killed Jews in the UK? That is something we all want not to see again. Anybody who knows about international history knows that during the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, we went through attacks that were not within Israel. So there's a risk of this kind of things happening all across the international global world, in the sense that Hamas doesn't have to keep this war within the confines of Israel. And that's what the US does not want, because there are a lot of Jews in America, and there are a lot of Arabs in America. Why does anybody envisage that this war cannot escalate beyond the confines of Gaza and Israel? So that is a major problem. Of course, the Middle East is involved. And the Arab nations still have a card that they have not played yet, which is the card of petroleum. Now, you remember the crisis of the 1970s. It was something similar. When we go back to that, we will pay petrol $200. It doesn't pay anybody. Yes, you might say that countries like Nigeria will now sell more crude oil, but that's not really true, because we still have to import some of the things that are made from foreign countries. So it's not really peaceful for anybody. So yes, the Arab League in its entirety is watching closely what's going on. But I would say I am not personally optimistic about this plan, because, like you said earlier, I'm sorry, Hamas has not been involved. The PLO has not been involved. Nobody at the Arab Center has not been involved. And even the extreme part of the Israeli parliament, the Knesset, don't like the deal. So who exactly are we talking about? We're talking of Netanyahu, who does not want peace. He actually wants to finish the job. And we're talking of Hamas, who does not really care about Israel existing. So who actually wants this peace? It seems like it's only Donald Trump that wants to do the peace. And I'm suspecting that because we're going towards the end of the year, he's looking at 1 or 2 awards, which we'll come into.
Yeah, I know that when he was at the UN, he did talk about that, how he has stopped 7 wars, he said, and how he's supposed to get a pat on the back. He's tried to cajole countries into recommending him for the Nobel Peace Prize. If he does succeed, however, with this deal, because now it's been referred to as Donald Trump's Gaza deal, if he does succeed with this, do you think he could clinch that Nobel Peace Prize?
Oh, definitely. With what is going on currently in the world, there are not too many people who are in a position to compete with him. And everybody is tired of the genocide going on in Gaza. I mean, let's call it what it is. You can see that several countries are reacting. The UK has recognized the Palestine state, even though it doesn't exist yet. I think France has done the same, Spain has done the same. And I think even in the football aspect of it, players are now organizing to tell UEFA to ban Israel in taking part in activities, even FIFA at the FIFA level. So you see that Australia as well, sorry, I forgot. That's a very strong country that is against them. South Africa took Israel to the ICJ. So there are a lot of people around the world that are tired of the status quo. They don't want this to continue. We see people dying every day. Some of it is propaganda. Some of it is real. I mean, we'll have to say the fact. So if Trump comes in and actually brokers this deal, which is not, I don't think it's sufficient, but I'm saying as it is, obviously he is in the front line to win it. Now, the question is, what happens after? And that's the real question everybody's asking in Palestine. What happens when Hamas drops their arms? Because part of the conditions is that Hamas must disarm. That is, you will see Hamas military people actually drop arms somewhere in an international zone. I want to believe that's how it's going to happen. Or to Egypt, or something like that. What happens when there is nobody protecting the Palestinians? What stops Netanyahu from launching another attack and bullshitting the deal? What's the worst that can happen? Is Trump going to attack Israel? I mean, let us be sincere. So it is looking like a very one-sided deal, and even like a game that Netanyahu is accepting to play. Because Netanyahu, I was quite surprised when I heard that he accepts, he's okay for the deal. I wouldn't have imagined Netanyahu to be okay with this deal, to be honest. So I'm surprised like many, because he has a stronger ambition to conquer Gaza and at least drive the remaining Palestinians away from Gaza.
Well, so many questions, honestly, and I really wish that we were both really privy to the 20-point agenda in the deal. But just taking you back to the recognition of Palestinian states by Australia by the UK, by France, recently, even Canada, just before the UN General Assembly, and even during the UN General Assembly. And, even Israel saying, that this really doesn't do anything, for the Palestinian people is one thing to recognize, is another thing really to give legitimacy to this government. And then you talk about the Hamas militants protecting the Palestinian people. Are you trying to say that if there is a state of Palestine, Hamas will be the military force in Palestine?
Well, I would not say it like that. I would not say Hamas will be, but definitely members of Hamas will be integrated. Hamas is a 30,000 fighter force, mostly of men. I would say Israel has decimated half of that. So let us imagine 15,000 have either been killed or arrested or have fled the Palestinian zone. But there are still 15,000 strong men in Hamas. I mean, currently alive and moving around. There is no way you would avoid those people from being the first force of any Palestinian army that would exist eventually if the state of Palestine is granted. But the processes are long. First thing first, recognition by some major countries is just one condition. We now have to go to the level where these things are accepted by the UN in terms of the UN organization, in terms of what they do, discussing at the United Nations Security Council. But we also know that the US might veto that. So the US might veto that to make it stay as long as possible in terms of years. We can be talking of 5-10 years. By the time it comes back on board, people will have forgotten the kind of atrocities we just witnessed ourselves.
Yeah, and just two questions just pop in my head, as you're talking about this. First of all, the UN Security Council and the quest for a permanent seat for Africa, would that have would that help to, create the balance, in this war? Would it have, brought in some insights that would have helped, countries to see more clearly what the decision should be regarding Israel and regarding Gaza? Because I figure that, if an African country, perhaps Nigeria or even South Africa, was a member of the UN Security Council, they would be the referees in this war.
Well, yes, that is what we will imagine. But I would say, okay, well, you mentioned several countries, so it's not exactly the same thing. For example, in your mind, you've taken out Egypt, for example, which has been very active. So you've taken out Egypt because, of course, the Israelis will not agree, knowing that Egypt will probably be kinder to Arab nations in general. You've put in Nigeria, which is a Muslim Christian country, predominantly Muslim, of course. And then you put in South Africa, which is quite
because Nigeria is the largest country in Africa and the largest economy as well. It does.
Well, it's not done. But it's not done by size. If we go by size, India should be there first. Well bigger than us, and probably Brazil should be not too far. But yes, I know what you mean. It's the African continent should be represented, and I think we all believe that. But I can bet that none of that will happen until there is sufficient peace in that zone. Why I'm saying this is because the United States of America knows very well that one of the reasons why an African country is asking to be there is to move the balance southwards. I mean, the balance of global balance. Because, of course, if Nigeria is there, let's use Nigeria as a case. If Nigeria is there, Nigeria will be against several things that are going on. And Nigeria would have a penchant for supporting southern countries, and of which Egypt, the Arabic countries are part of it. So United States will definitely hold on to that until after stable and unconditional peace exists in this zone. But it would be a great thing. On a personal level, it would be a great thing to have an African country on the permanent seat. The reason, the question is who and when. It will definitely happen, but who and when? Which country and when?
Yeah, the when really is really important, because
yes.
I know this issue of a permanent seat for Africa has been an ongoing issue, at every UN General Assembly. African countries bringing that up to the front burner. Also, what is in it for Trump if the Hamas militants accept this deal, return the hostages, agree to everything, in his Gaza deal? I know, yes, he might get the Nobel Peace Prize, he might not get it, But what exactly is in it for him? He's talked about his own plans for Gaza, whether or not he's being serious. A new Gaza, he says, he'll move everybody out, refurbish the place, renovate, build skyscrapers and all the rest of them, and then finally have, his own people move in. What do you think the President Trump will gain out of it, out of having won this war, well, vicariously through Israel in Gaza?
Okay, this is the part where it is very obvious that we have a politician and a businessman, who was first a businessman anyway. So, for example, Iraq and parts of Afghanistan are being reconstructed as we speak. A lot of the companies that do that are funded by the EU and the United States, but the companies are Qatari, Saudi, and so on and so forth. Companies from that zone. Of course, they are backed by the US. You see the influence. The influence is not direct, but it's indirect. The funding comes from the US, the funding comes from EU and Japan and so on. But the companies that do it are Qatari companies that have affiliates in the US. So indirectly, there is business involved. Because all these things, all these destructions we've seen in the last 2 years have to be reconstructed. If you look at the features of Gaza before the IDF attacks, and today, you will be wondering, where is everybody? What went wrong? No schools, no hospitals, nowhere to go, no theaters, nothing. All those things have to be reconstructed. So the businessman in Trump is looking at it from the business angle. His son-in-law is very involved in construction in Qatar, very involved in construction in Iraq through other companies. And so most likely this will happen. But where he really gains,
I think he's also waiting in the wings to get into Gaza. I think he's also waiting. Jared Kushner, I think he's also waiting in the wings to get into Gaza.
Exactly. That is a very key one. But the most important one is political, like you rightly mentioned. Donald Trump is leaving his last term as president. He has barely 3 years to go. He wants to leave a legacy. And in countries like the United States that are developed, legacy is not by road, as it could be for Nigeria. Legacy is really by international victories. What have you done? George Bush said he fought terrorism, after the 9/11. Obama tried to get the Iran peace deal. It worked up to a while, and then it was catapulted. Trump is looking at it. If he can bring in the Middle East crisis, if he can solve the Middle East crisis, Trump will be a champion for all over the world. In fact, we'll write books about Donald Trump well after he has gone. You see what I'm saying? So if a living American president can find the grounds for peace in the Middle East, I mean, he will be the hero of so many people, especially of the right wing in the United States. So besides the business, which we have mentioned, he is looking at a political legacy for life. The man that has brought peace to the Middle East. Don't forget, we that we are observing, we also know that he's the man that brought chaos, because he's the one that gave the green light to Netanyahu to do all what he has done in the last 2 years. These things could have been achieved without 50,000 people dying.
Yeah, and that really is a sad part, isn't it? Also, the fact that we can't verify the figures coming out of Gaza. We just have the Gaza health authorities telling us about 20,000 people have died in a day. So many number of journalists have been killed and so on, but then no international media is able to get in there, not even a media from Africa. But I guess we'll have to...
not from Africa.
Yeah, we'll have to wait.
But we do have NGOs. We do have NGOs. We do have health organizations. We do have... they're on ground, and they have figures. They do have figures. They might not be accurate, but they have figures.
Yeah, but this is the thing, though, with humanitarian organizations. They will always look at this from a humanitarian perspective, not necessarily looking at the whole picture, of what is going on. They're looking at, the number of people being killed, the children being killed, people starving, the provision of aid, and so on. But the politics of it all, they're really not involved. But we they're not involved. We do need to look at the whole thing holistically. Thank you so much, Alexander. I always enjoy these conversations with you, and we never seem to have enough time. But I guess we have till 6 p.m. Washington time to find out exactly what happens. We'll probably get updates on the Diplomatic Channel. Thank you again.
I think all fingers crossed. We're looking at least Hamas signing the deal. Like I said, my skepticism is on the Israeli side. The Israeli parliament, they are not very happy with this kind of deal, even though it favors them. They are looking at it as so if they can use the advantage of a ceasefire and do one or two kinetic attacks, let me put it that way, you will be surprised that Israel might take that chance. Because it can be, like one of the parliamentary Israelis said, he said, finish the job. And that is a very bad statement to say. What job are you talking about? It's obviously to make sure that Hamas is totally eliminated and weaken the Palestinians.
Perhaps before you go, let me just quickly ask you this, because I noticed that at the UNGA, a number of African countries' leaders who did speak to the General Assembly did support a two-state solution, the state of Palestine and the state of Israel.
Yes.
And, some are wondering, how exactly is this Africa's problem?
Oh, of course it is Africa's problem. The question of the Middle East concerns us fully in terms of beside the humanitarian aspect, which is a major aspect. We're all humans, we're all on earth. One crisis on one side affects all of us. There's also the economic aspect of it. That is the main zone of transport for everybody. And then at the same time, if peace does not exist in what I call the Muslim world, how will it not affect our Muslim brothers here in Nigeria? We cannot pretend that there is no link between the religions. There's a link. So everybody is looking at it from a humanitarian aspect. When we had plane kidnappings in the 70s and 80s, it affected travel everywhere. After the 9/11, it affected everybody. Remember, traveling changed. You couldn't now go with a liquid in the planes. So everything affects everybody. It is actually false for people to believe that it is far from us. It's not as far as we think it is. In fact, Egypt is well involved. Qatar is well involved. Nigerians go to Qatar a lot. You know that. So the reality is this. If there is peace in that region, we will all benefit from it. Israel is one of the countries that exports a lot of fruits, a lot of vegetables, and they export a lot of IT technology. We will have businesses working with Israelis, even in Nigeria. We will have, as we used to have in the 70s and 80s, we used to have a lot of businesses with Israel. Some of those things are not going on because of the tendency to accuse the IDF of genocide. Nobody wants to be associated with that. So there's a lot to gain for everybody in that sense. Why would we not want to have peace with Israel? But it's difficult to have peace with Israel if Israel is dominating a region of the country that has brothers and sisters somehow related to people that we have here. So it's something that Donald Trump should really look into properly and go for global peace.
Yeah. Alexander, once again, thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you so much. Have a lovely evening.
And this is where we end the program today. Don't forget to leave your thoughts in the comment section, either on the social media handles or on YouTube. I'm Amarachi Ubani. I'll see you next time.